My Brother Was an Art Collector. Written by DaveMustainesToenail. I was on the couch. It was a spotless island floating among a frothing pot of chaos, safe from the ooze of decay that surrounded the house. Surrounded, perhaps, would not be an appropriate word to describe the state of the environment. The house was living garbage, pulsating like exposed meat, peeled from the skin of an animal. Seated directly across from me was a man I hadn't visited in many years. My own brother. Carter and I hadn't always been at odds. I can still recall the tender look in his eyes when I was sickly as a child, or the way he would convince our mother to let me eat just the meat at dinner and not the vegetables, which I detested with a passion. But time had caused frustration to grow like a parasite on our backs, a crushing, suffocating kind of frustration. And I found that there were several lifestyle choices with which I could not agree, namely that Carter was a hoarder. The disease of the house began to fester after Carter's divorce. He'd been an art collector before, but he just began to keep random items. His obsession with art molded into something far worse. When his wife was gone, I think the items in the household that once belonged to the two of them gained new meaning. They saturated the air with her scent, and he was a fruit fly drawn to the hollow carcass of her memory. It started with the garage, then the mess crawled its way down the throat of the house into the hallway, infecting everything with the stench of longing and choking regret. "Why can't you just leave me be?" Carter whined. His voice sounded a million miles away, bouncing off of every object in the room and pounding at the back of my eyes. "I can't let you live like this. It's filthy. It's fucking vile. And someone needs to take action. Are you planning to live and die in this garbage? What about all the expensive art? It doesn't deserve to be in here." "I'll live how I please," he replied, seeming small and helpless among the mounds of old boxes filled with who knows what. The stench was unbearable, so I pulled out a cigarette. Carter let out a strangled cry, shaking his head vigorously. "Don't smoke in here, it ruins this." He abruptly cut himself off, eyes wider than $2 half-dollars. There was enough tension in the room to light my cigarette. I frowned and put it away, immediately regretting it, as the sick fragrance filled my lungs. "I'm going to help you get rid of this mess," I told him. And so I did, but not without Carter's strange directions about where I could and couldn't go. We cleaned from 11 that morning until 3 in the afternoon, shifting the dull heaps of clothes and papers until there was a clear path through the stacks of objects that meant nothing. He was very adamant that I not open any of the boxes or the cabinets. I was only to move them as a whole, which seemed reasonable, as picking through individual pieces of junk did not particularly sound like a good time, but his protest became more odd as the day went on. "No going to the bathroom. Please, Steve, stay away from her room. You know how it is. I don't want you to use Febreze or anything like that in here." Inevitably, when a man has to take a piss, well, he's got to take a piss. Meanwhile, while Carter was poking around at a few boxes, I went into the bathroom. I nearly vomited at the rancid smell I encountered there. I had expected fecal matter and urine to line the walls, but there was an eerie horror to what I saw instead. The bathroom was spotless. The only thing that appeared cluttered was shrunken husks of clothing, attached to the shower curtain by pins. It was women's clothing of all shapes and sizes, silk bathrobes, narrow coats, soiled underwear. I reeled in distaste as I made my way to the toilet. All of them were caked in a layer of dirt and grime. Did his obsession with his ex-wife run this deep? I shuddered to think of what she had endured during the first 2 years that they were married. Why didn't he want me in here? I did my business quickly, but Carter saw me leaving the bathroom. A spider of fear clambered up each one of my vertebrae when he locked eyes with me. I told you not to go in the bathroom, Steve. Oh, so I wouldn't see your damn collection? What the hell is in there? I exploded at him. The fear turned into fury, and I marched down the slim path we'd made through the trash. In my outburst of anger, I knocked over one of the boxes, and its terrifying contents spilled all over the ground. Maggots flew everywhere, writhing around, breathing in unison like the flank of a massive white beast. I flung my hand back and took a step. The maggots crunched beneath my feet. Their juices seeped between my sandals, and their half-bodies threatened to squirm up onto my feet. But that was far from the worst of it. At the dead center of this writhing mass was a hand. Its ring finger had been removed from above the knuckle. It moved with conviction, led along by maggots that had burrowed their way beneath the fingernails. It was more a mass of flesh than any hand I have ever seen, but the slender nails and fingertips could be seen clearly despite the wriggling heaps that surrounded it. I wanted to flee. I wanted to never return to that godforsaken house. But the pleading look in Carter's eyes made me freeze in place. Explain this! I tried to sound assertive, but my voice shook more than a harmonica. I needed to call someone. I needed to call the police. I was paralyzed with fear and disgust. Only Carter's voice brought me back. I can't. He whimpered, breathless. It's my art. Carter, get yourself together, I choked. You have a hand in your house. A hand! I paused, and then with endless caution, I opened the other boxes around us, one by one. The smell that had risen through the house intensified. I was numb to it all. If I could have gone back in time, I would have pinched myself, convinced myself it was a nightmare, and gone home. The boxes were full of hands, each with their ring fingers removed. My heart pounded its way up into my mouth, pressing against the back of my tongue and threatening to join the maggots on the floor. One by one, they were unmistakably all women's hands. I vomited on the floor. When I was finished hacking up the remains of my lunch, Carter put his hand on my shoulder. Come here. Come to her room. No one else has seen this before. He guided me, snot running down my nose, into his ex-wife's bedroom. A bloody arrangement was laid before my eyes. The missing fingers, I knew where they went. Upon every windowsill, covering every inch of the bedroom, were flower pots, and stuck into the soil, sprung up and growing from them was a garden of fingers. Their wedding rings blinded me, rings of all sizes on all types of hands, each rotting and clinging to the soil, decaying, filled with so many flies that there was no blacker black, covering the wall like glorious pins of shiny satin. Beneath the pulsing flies, the walls were covered with photographs. I couldn't see them clearly, but on occasion I caught a glance of shiny white smiles and squinted eyes looking right into the camera. Carter was later found responsible for 27 local grave robberies. I wish I could have stopped him. I wish I could have caught his obsession before it was too late. I can only imagine the distress he has caused to the families of these women. He'll spend most of his life behind bars for his grotesque actions, and I can't say he doesn't deserve it. I wish I could wake up. Every thought is haunted by the rings. Every movement is followed by some vengeful spirit beyond the grave. I feel responsible for what he has done, and an immense guilt hangs over me. I can only hope that talking this out will release some of my shame.